Welcome, folks. If you don't mind, squeeze, share. There, I see little seats here and there. There's a couple of seats over here. There's floor space. Thank you, students, for taking the initiative. Come on up here, grab some floor space. A little overwhelming turnout for what we expected, so thank you for your patience. I appreciate if you notice the passion in this room for the subject that we're going to be talking about tonight. Thank you for your patience in making room for everybody that wants to hear what's going on tonight. So come on in. There's we can crowd some floor space up here. We'll just ask Sergeant King to watch out where he steps when he comes on up here. So, good evening, Dr. Jamie. I am Dr. Jamie Gates, direct the Center for Justice and Reconciliation here at Point Loma Nazarene University. And you're here tonight in a speaker series known as Brewed Awakening, serving fair trade coffee, tea, and speakers to stir the social conscience. So welcome. The Center for Justice and Reconciliation is, let me first ask this question. How many of you are not from Point Loma here tonight, from the university? All right. I know that we have, I saw Dana Nurs here, Dr. Nurs here, and some of her students, graduate students from SDSU. Can I see, where are you? SDSU's in the house. I know a number of you are from the community. I saw Shirley Farrell here, works with the Interfaith Committee for Worker Justice and all kinds of other really cool stuff. Who else do we have in the room? Any other groups represented in the room from other schools? Or?
I represent Breaking Chains.
Breaking Chains, all right. Breaking Chains in the house. What's your name?
Michelle.
Michelle. Welcome, Michelle. All right. Any other folks who want to introduce themselves? A little shy in a group this size. All right. So a particular welcome to all of you coming from off campus, and particular thank you to the Point Loma students who make room for our guests from off campus. The Center for Justice and Reconciliation gets students involved in pressing social issues, and not just in their heads academically, but gets people out involved on the ground. And so I have the students I'd like to introduce to you tonight are each involved in internships with the Center for Justice and Reconciliation, and they're going to tell you a little bit about the work that they do. So. I have one note from a student who can't be here tonight. We have an internship in immigration and around immigration issues. We'd like to invite you, I don't know if you know this, but your city every year does La Posada Sin Fronteras on December 10th. People gather on both sides of the border where the border meets the ocean. And they celebrate a cross-border sort of Christmas celebration. And we also mourn those who have died crossing the border. So December 10th, 2 to 4, so you'll see this flyer out there if you want to know more about it. And so let me also introduce you then. Marissa Herzl has a fun event coming up on Friday.
Hello everybody, it's so cool to see so many people here. And just like Jamie said, the passion that's in this room, and if human trafficking is something that's like close to your heart, fair trade should be also. We're having a fair trade event this Friday on Kathleen. It's
Me and I'll switch over and use the mic. I do have a PowerPoint presentation.
People on the call can hear without the mic. Yeah, sorry.
No problem. We'll adjust. Okay. It's just kind of how I have to do things. I've been with the Sheriff's Department for about 17 years. For the last 5 of those years, I have ran a task force, which we're going to talk about, and what we've learned with this stuff. So we'll go ahead and we'll just get started on it. I'm not going to read from the PowerPoint. I use it simply to kind of help keep me on task with what I want to cover. Otherwise, I can go off on tangents and we'll be here all night. So I know we are going to I'm going to try to limit this to about 30 minutes or so that we can go into questions. I always find when I give presentations that afterwards you have a lot more questions than you did when you came in. And so I want to make sure that we can answer those questions, or at least get you pointed in the right direction to figure out what those are going to be. So human trafficking, right off the bat. Back in February of 2007, I was working an administrative job up at the sheriff's main headquarters, and one of the assistant sheriffs came up and said, Jason, we want you to take over running the human trafficking task force. This was a grant that the Sheriff's Department had received in 2004, 2005, to create a task force and attack human trafficking. And my first question, human trafficking, what in the world does the Sheriff's Department have to do with human trafficking? In my mind, human trafficking was a huge sea train on a cargo ship, maybe up in LA. But how in the world does that affect the Sheriff's Department? What are we going to do with that? So I had to go out and get myself educated, figure out what we're talking about. So just to kind of clarify, I'm not going to read it again, human trafficking versus smuggling, because that's what people always kind of get tied up with? Are we talking smuggling? Are we talking trafficking? The easiest way to put this in your mind is when you are smuggled into the country, the relationship between you and the smuggler ends when you get in the country. You go your way and the smuggler goes his way and it's over. In human trafficking, that relationship will continue. They may hold your documents, they may hold things over your head, make you do certain things, whatever it is, but that's the difference. That's how you can identify human trafficking versus smuggling, is that in human trafficking, that relationship is going to continue. So, what we did in 2007, we created a task force. We brought in all the local law enforcement agencies, the federal agencies, service providers, prosecutors, IRS. I went to a conference once and I was listening to IRS agents speak, and I found a really interesting thing about IRS. They don't care how you get your money, you just got to pay taxes on it. So if I can't build a really good human trafficking case at you, I can certainly start looking at your income. Where's your money? Oh, you have all these assets. Where did that come from? And we can maybe go after you for tax evasions. So we've kind of built a task force around all the players that we thought had a hand in this. And it's really interesting because the last two are nonprofit organizations, social service providers. As cops, we're not probably the easiest people to work with. We're kind of headstrong. We kind of think we know what we want to do, and there isn't no getting around that. Well, we ended up finding out real quickly that our nonprofit organizations, our social service providers, were really the key to this. Law enforcement is a piece of this pie, but it certainly is not the entire pie. We've got to have all these players. So this is kind of what we brought together in our task force. Every agency in the county was represented, and it just took off. So what did we learn? We really learned this is prostitution, sex trafficking. That's what we're dealing with here in San Diego. That's what my task force really addressed. Labor trafficking, we just didn't see it a lot. Now, does it mean that it's not occurring? No. I'm sure it is occurring, we just didn't find it. We didn't find it as prevalent. Everything that we did on our task force was all proactive. Meaning we didn't wait for referrals to come in and stuff like that. We actively engaged it, went out and looked for it. With labor trafficking, we just didn't find a lot of it. Again, it's not saying that didn't occur, but domestic versus international. If you looked at any of the documentaries that first started out in this stuff, talking human trafficking, there was a lot of hype around the international. In fact, when I first got into this business, you couldn't find anything, any documentaries, any reports that were going on talking about domestic. Everything was international. Here in San Diego, we found out that it was the opposite for us. It's all domestic. About 98% of our victims that we identified in the last 5 years were our own people. Were U.S. citizens that were simply being exploited. Now that's been explained to me in many ways. There's different theories. One of those theories are that as people are smuggled into the U.S., they're moved immediately further inland and away from San Diego because of our proximity to the border. That could be. It could also be that we just weren't finding it as easily as what we were finding domestic. But the domestic trafficking is really what we dealt with in sex trafficking. We also really figured out quickly that this is all gang related now. Our gangsters have moved into this business because there's so much money to be made. And there's very little risks involved for them. When you look at gang activity, gangs normally deal in narcotics. That's their primary bread and butter. Well, when you're dealing in narcotics, you have to first find where to buy it. You have to go pick it up. You have to move it. Then you have to distribute it. Along each one of those ways, you're subject for arrest. You get pulled over and it's in your car, it's in your pants, it's in your bag, whatever. What are you going to do? I mean, it's on you. It's yours. But in sex trafficking, I can drive all over the county with this person in my car. It's not illegal. I can get pulled over. Nobody knows. And if I can put enough fear into her, and I'm going to use her, and you're going to hear that, I'll explain that real quick. I use her and she's because the majority of our victims, probably 99% of our victims, were female. We did have a few male victims. Again, not saying that it's not occurring on that side, but what we found was female. So you can drive all over the place with her. You can go in public wherever, and it's not a crime. And the money is incredible. But we're going to talk about that. I think it's the crime of the future, and that's what we're already seeing with our gangs. Moving into this stuff, from where we started out in 07 to where we ended up this year, it's gang affiliation. This is what they're moving into. And who are our victims? Anybody? Teens, runaway, problems, rebellious people. It didn't matter. I had victims that came from very highfalutin families that just got mixed up. We're going to talk about some of those things of how do these people get involved in this stuff. But that was kind of my conception. When I first came on to getting into this, I'd been a cop for 12 years. I'd worked at almost every spot in this county with the Sheriff's Department. The beauty with the Sheriff's Department, you can work anywhere in the county. I've dealt with gangsters, I've dealt with the backcountry, you name it, I've worked it. And I thought prostitution was just a problem on my beat. I thought the prostitutes were all dopers, or drunks, or both. And they were doing it because they wanted to. I soon learned different. Where are they recruited? Anywhere young people congregate. Parks, concerts, movie theaters, shopping malls, and unfortunately we started seeing it occurring on our school campuses. And we started a heavy campaign into the schools because of that problem. But really, about anywhere youth goes, that's where recruiting is occurring. If you've ever seen the movie Taken, I'm not one that usually promotes movies and stuff like that. And if you watch this movie, you got to look past the guy that can take on an entire world by himself. But if you look at the bottom line of how the victim is targeted immediately as she gets off a plane, that's what we're dealing with. These guys are so good, these pimps, traffickers, whatever you want to call them, are so good that as soon as they see their potential victim, it's like stalking their prey, and they start working that. This was an FBI statistic. I believe it's based off of a 2005-2006 study that listed San Diego as one of the top 13 cities. I think that has moved now to number 8, but I don't remember the year that they based that off of. So that was just an interesting, that was totally oblivious to me that would be, we would rank that high. Who are our suspects? Snoop Dogg. Everybody knows old Snoop, right? He's a lifelong pimp. That's how he started out in this business. He's a gangster. He's been a pimp most of his life. It is what it is. Gang affiliation, like we talked about. We saw this gang a few years ago develop down in the South Bay County. PhD. Interesting name. Pimping Hoes Daily. Their whole focus was prostitution. That's all they did. They ended up, as they got bigger and more advanced, they started dealing in stolen property and some narcotics, but their primary focus was prostitution. They were very structured in their organization. They had generals, they had a hierarchy of command. Each person had a sole job. One guy was a recruiter, one guy was a trainer, one was an enforcer, and that's all they did. And they just continued to bring in victims constantly and putting girls out. How do they control them? That's probably the number one thing people always ask me. Why do they stay? Why do they do it? Force, fear, emotional manipulation. We usually say we have two different types of pimps. We have what we call a finesse pimp. This guy is so suave, he just makes them fall in love with him. He becomes everything to them. To where the point that they love him. To where we have the force guy, the fear guy, we call him the gorilla pimp. This is the guy that basically grabs a girl, and we've had both cases, grabs a girl from somewhere, takes her out to the Blade, a place where they put girls out into prostitution, basically beats her before we get there, maybe rapes her, maybe has his homies rape her, and then tells her, if you don't do this, all of that is going to happen again. And we've had both those types of cases. Had a case where a gal was up in the LA area at one of their famous nightclubs. She was partying with the group in the VIP section. Next thing she knows, she obviously was slipped something. She wakes up here in San Diego in a hotel room. She's naked. They're taking pictures of her, posting her on Craigslist at the time, and then forced her into this business until she finally escaped from the room, got a hold of the hotel manager, and called the police. So we've had both cases of that. Most of our finesse pimps eventually become into the force sphere. It's kind of like domestic violence. Nobody wakes up one day and says, hey, you know what? I want to marry you, but you got to promise you got to beat me, you got to talk down to me, you got to treat me like garbage. It's not how it works. They fall in love with them. And then slowly, over a period of time, that's introduced until finally they're living in a very violent, physical relationship that they're stuck in. And that's what we see here. The victims do get a sense of belonging, of family. A lot of our victims have been at the very low end of life. They have nothing else. Whether they're a runaway, a throwaway, whatever you want to call them. But at least with him, and maybe he's running 2 or 3 other girls, they have a sense of family. And so they desire that. They want that. And so that's one way that they'll stay. Rules of this game. The game is what it's called. They work 24/7. They don't ever get time off. They are available all the time. The victims will earn, they've all told me, I've probably done over 300 interviews with victims, and they all pretty much say the same thing. They make between $500 and $1,000 a night. Now you can see where that money comes in. You think about that, you're putting out 2 girls a month, on the low end, $500 a night, that's 30 grand. We arrested a 19-year-old kid up in the North County. He was putting out 2 girls. He finally beat one of them so bad that they decided to run. They ended up running into traffic, almost got hit by some cars. That's how deputies got called. But this guy was running 2 girls, never finished high school. 2 weeks before we arrested him, he had gone into BMW and paid $54,000 cash for a 5 Series Beamer. We also confiscated $8,000 out of his bank account. That's the kind of money we're talking about. That's why our gangs are moving into this stuff. This is big business for them. If you have this conception or this idea that the prostitutes are getting anything out of this, they're not. The pimps are taking all the money. They may buy them some food, put them in a sleazy hotel, buy them some clothes to put them out on the street, but they're not taking the money. It's not their money. It's his money. Can't tell you how many girls we've arrested that through the course of the interview, they'll finally say, you know what, I'll tell you anything. Can you just buy me something to eat? But yet she's got $300, $400 sitting in her pocket. Well, ask her, well, you got all that money, why don't you go get a burger? Well, that's not my money. That's crazy. I can't even fathom that understanding that they have. It's not their money, yet they're the ones out there earning. So that's what we're dealing with. They teach them how to lie. They tell them that they're the actually bad person. They're the ones committing the crime. If you talk to the police, all they're going to do is arrest you, etc., etc. And the pimp always knows where they're at. It's total control. Victim rewards, what do they get out of it? They get that feeling of worth, of value. They want to please him. That's what they, even when the pimps get 2, 3, 4 girls working for him, he will call them his stable. And there's a competition within that group of girls to be the top girl. We call that girl the lead prostitute, the bottom bitch. That's what they refer to him as. And she will rule the roost for him. Sometimes she will also do some recruiting, she'll collect money, but that's a very prestigious position for one of the girls to get to. So they'll work very hard to get to that position. But they get that feeling of family. Clothes, food, like I said, cell phone. These last 2, nails and a Coach purse. I started seeing this when I first got into it. These girls would come in, they would have their nails done, and they'd be carrying a Coach purse. And it just always, what the heck? So we started asking them and talking to them about that. Those nails and that Coach purse represented something to them. That they were somebody. I didn't really know a lot about a Coach purse until my wife asked for one for Christmas. Right? I'm thinking, you just want a purse? Really? Until I went and found out how much they are. Oh my gosh, you're kidding me. Does it come with money? I mean, that's what they get. But that's them. Now they get to walk around. They got this bag on their shoulder. I'm somebody. I'm not a piece of garbage. That's what they get. And the pimps know that. So we do a lot of human trafficking operations. We would do street prostitution, hotel dates, car dates, massage parlors. All of these operations we're doing proactively to try to identify victims. We would arrest them. It does sound like a contradiction. We're calling them a victim, but yet we're arresting them. But the whole purpose of that arrest, going out and getting them, is so that I can get an interview with them. Because now they have to sit there with me. They don't have to talk, but they at least have to listen. And through our expertise with working with these victims, either through us or we would bring service providers with us out into the field, we could sometimes develop a rapport with them. And once they started to talk, they wanted to tell their story. And it was amazing. Amazing how these victims, they could all remember the first trip, the first time, the first guy, down to the tattoos he had, to his smelly breath, to everything. Vividly remember that first time. And from that point on, they go, boy, they don't even feel it. They all said the same thing. So that's what we want to do, is we want to get that interview. Off of that, we would, of course, try to work the suspect and go after him. But our task force was completely victim-centered, meaning we would tell the girls from the very beginning, if you don't want to talk to us, you don't want to tell us anything about that, about what's going on, that's fine. If you want out of the life, we'll get you out of the life. We worked with a number of organizations that would come out at 3 o'clock in the morning and take a girl off the street for us and put them into a safe house and start counseling for them. But that was our primary goal. And the beauty of it is that my grant supported that. I wasn't under the gun to make suspect arrests. I was to provide services for victims. And that's what we did. Every victim that we came across, we provided services, or at least gave them the opportunity. And I would guess that probably half of them would look into it at least. We worked with a couple of different church organizations. Some of the girls, we would kind of like give them a menu of what are you looking for? And some of the girls really wanted that faith connection. They knew that what they were doing was wrong. They had a moral issue with it, and that was a great connection for them. The Rock Church has a great outreach ministry, Hidden Treasures Ministry, that worked with us. Other organizations did a great job for us too. So we kind of laid it out for them and told them, here, these are the different things that are out there. But whatever you want, whatever you need, we're going to make it happen for you. And we had some really good success stories out of it. Craigslist, these are postings. Everybody always asks me about trends. Is this an up and coming? Are we seeing an increase? It's so hard to say, because for so long, we as a society, law enforcement, but also as a society, looked at prostitution as what? Victimless crime. I know my idea of prostitution was Pretty Woman, right? This is the gal that meets the man of her dreams, makes a lot of money, and ends up having the fairy tale ending. That's what I thought. But it's not. And we as a society have to change that. We have to look at prostitution differently. But for the longest time, we overlooked this stuff. So there aren't any really good statistics to compare to say, yes, it's increasing, or no, it's decreasing. But I think that right here, it is increasing. The internet. And I always compare it back to pornography. If we look at pornography 15, 20 years ago, If you wanted to look at porn, you'd have to go to a store that sold it. You'd have to walk in there. Somebody could see you going in. You'd have to buy it. Somebody could see you coming out. Well, now you can sit at home and view as much pornography as you want on the internet. Nobody knows. Nobody's going to catch you. So it goes on. Prostitution was the same. There's only about 5 places in the county that you can go pick up a street walking prostitute. You have to know where those locations are. You have to know how to do it. There's a certain system. It could be an undercover sting. Somebody could see you. Hey, what were you doing on Elkhorn Boulevard? Well, now with prostitution, or with the internet and prostitution, Craigslist, Backpage, all of those, I can sit at home. I can view the girls. I can read. There's a couple of social sites that you can get onto that rate the girls. If you're into certain things, call this person. And I can call her up and she'll come to my house. And nobody knows. We could literally order a prostitute to our location as quick as we could get pizza. That's how easy it was. And that's why this is such a booming business. Now again, there aren't any trends to compare it to. There isn't anything to go back and say, yes, it's increasing or it's decreasing. But this right here changed it all. Craigslist, thank God, has taken down their adult service website due to the pressures that were being placed on them. But now there's 10 other ones that have stepped in. Backpage right now is the biggest one. We did almost all of our stuff off of Backpage. We would work in detail. We would never run out of opportunities. They're just endless on there. The circuit, we would get these girls, they would deny that they're involved. We would see that they'd have multiple arrests here in San Diego, Orange County, LA, Vegas, Arizona. Phoenix, for some reason, came up onto the radar of this stuff. We're not sure what is the draw to Phoenix, but it's part of the circuit down here. And basically, the pimp will move them from place to place to place. One, because they usually end up getting too many arrests in that one location and they got to move them. Two, keeps them off balance. If you keep moving her to a new place, a new location, she doesn't have time to really meet anybody, get comfortable where she's at, they move her again. And so that's kind of the circuit. It's funny, when we were doing operations, if we were doing a big scale op, we'd actually have to get on and find out if there's anything big going on in Las Vegas. If there was some huge event going on, boxing, whatever, in Vegas, all of our girls would go to Vegas and there wouldn't be anybody available down here. So we actually had to start watching those things when we were planning our ops. This is something that we've really seen come on the scene. It's brand new. The pimp will essentially put his name on his victim. Shows ownership, humiliation to her, that she belongs to this person. This is real stuff. This was Holly. Holly came from a very, very nice community, a very upscale class community. She was 19 years old, very nice gal, good head on her shoulders. She was just in love with this guy and believed that he loved her. She'd make $140 for a half hour, service about 50 men a week, $7,000 is what she was making him. But she believed that she loved him. And that's the craziness of this stuff. But we've really started to see this branding has gone now to a whole new level. We'll see girls that come in with 4-inch lettering across their chest with their pimp's name. My last picture in this slide really says it all. But this is just another tactic that they're using to humiliate them and to show who they belong to. Over that time period, we investigated a little over 300 incidents, 450 victims. Kind of the interesting thing about this is that this was all done on a part-time basis. None of the people on our task force were full-time members. We all did this as a collateral duty, basically working overtime. After our regular work hours, we would go out. And so in that time period, these are the numbers that we put up. The 41% confirmed gang members, that was pretty amazing to us. That number stayed right around there between 41 and 45%. You got to understand, to be considered an actual gang member, it takes a lot of documentation. So to actually have 41% of them as confirmed gang members is pretty amazing. We ended up moving our task force into our gang unit on the Sheriff's Department because of the involvement with the gangs. And so just was incredible. The other one was 31% were juveniles under the age of 18. Almost, I would guess that probably 75% or better of the girls that weren't minors when we contacted them all stated that they started out when they were minors. Most of the girls that we come in contact with get involved with this between 14 and 16 years old. And we've had them up as old as about 26. But let me tell you, there's no limits on who can become a victim. I tell this story, this was a really interesting case that we worked. We were doing a detail downtown San Diego. We arrested 2 girls, and during the interview, they just denied that they were involved in human trafficking, that they didn't have a pimp or anything, and just they were just playing around and got caught up in it. So we ended up issuing them a citation and sent them on their way. A couple weeks later, one of the girls called us up and said, "Hey, I need to talk to you. I'm applying for nursing school, and I can't have this arrest on my record. I need to come clean." She came in and told a story about how she answered an escort service ad. And I think, in her mind, I believe that she really thought that she would go out on dates with people, have maybe dinners, movies, etc., and be a companion, kind of be a trophy, but wasn't actually going to have sex with. I think I believe that was what she thought when she answered this ad. She ended up meeting this guy that was putting out the ad. She met with him. He told her about how much money she was going to make and how great this was going to be. She ended up having some drinks with him, smoked a little marijuana, ended up spending the night with him. When she woke up the next morning, 5 other gang members were now in the apartment. One of them sat a gun down in front of her and said, "You're having sex with these 2 guys." And that's how she got involved. And now she was tracked. He knew where she lived. He knew everything about her. And now she didn't know what to do. And that was her story. We thought, wow, that's pretty incredible. So we brought the other girl in, and she told the exact same story. When she finally figured out that we knew what had happened, she was recruited the exact same way. So we got on the internet, and we found this guy's ad. So we started answering it. And we sent in a female undercover officer, and she was recruited the exact same way. We ended up pulling her out before it got too deep. We ended up making 7 arrests on that case, and all of them pled guilty before it even went to prelim. They got about, I think the highest was, one of them got 7 years, and the others got about 4 to 5 years prison time. The beauty with pimping and pandering in that law section is it's a mandatory prison term. So you get caught one time, you are going to prison. No ifs, ands, or buts. A judge can't reduce it and give you only probation or only county time. You are going to go to prison. So that is one thing that we really have on our side with this stuff. And so, when you look at this group, 7 years for the leader of it was pretty amazing. But that just shows you that anybody, these are 2 college students that simply were trying to make some extra money and ended up getting into a world that they couldn't get out of. And so when you think about this, when you look at the victim, people ask me, again, why do they stay in it? What is it? But if you think about it, you're this girl, 16, 18 years old, you're in love with him, as they always are. He's your boyfriend. He's the knight in shining armor for you. And he drops the bomb on you. If you really love me, you'll do this. But it'll only be for a short time. We'll make so much money that we'll live like kings. And if you won't do it, then I'll find somebody that will. So they agree, and they do that first trick. They give away that most precious thing they can, And then he spins it on him, turns it around. Now, you're a whore. I'm the best you're ever going to get. What other guy would accept you? You sold yourself. What would your mom think? What would your grandmother think? And these guys end up knowing everything about you. We had one victim that wanted to get out of the life. Her pimp showed her a picture of her little brother playing in the front yard. You make a threat against him, they know everything. They get in your head, they get in your family. They know all about you. And once you get into it, they aren't going to let you out. And that's where we come in. And through our providers that we work with, hopefully we can rebuild that, get them out of that life, and get them moving on to a different life. But it's interesting, if you look at the recidivism rate on a domestic violence victim historically will go back to their abuser 7 times before they leave for good. We see that a lot in this line of work. And so it's a case of not being judgmental on them. We basically got to just keep offering and keep working at it to try to get them out. But that's what we did. County activities, we really did some interesting things with this. A lot of people got involved. Like I said, Grossmont School District really took the lead because we started seeing so much recruiting on the high school campus. These gangsters going to school and recruiting and sending in their bottoms to recruit. And so we started doing training throughout Grossmont School District. That is now moving into San Diego Unified School District, and hopefully other districts are going to come on board soon. Grossmont actually now has created a protocol on how to handle a CSEC. You'll hear that term, CSEC, commercial sexual exploitation of children. That's a big term that's going around. But they actually have a CSEC protocol now on how to handle a potential victim, to make sure that they don't fall through the cracks, that intervention is immediately applied, that law enforcement gets involved if necessary. And so it's just really been a great program. Supervisor Diane Jacob has gotten involved. The county, San Diego County Board of Supervisors officially recognized human trafficking, took board action. We created some legislation that is currently going through the process to try to change some of our laws with this, so it's really been helpful in keeping this movement going. We created a regional CSEC council, which is chaired by law enforcement, service providers, research, so it kind of has the whole gamut, and that's the whole purpose of that group, is to bring a collaborative effort throughout the county to continue the effort of human trafficking. This is my last slide. It says this person is the property of Sugar Shack. He was one of our local pimps. He's doing 25 to life right now. All those who come in contact with her are indebted to him. This was tattooed on her thigh. This is one of the first cases of branding that we really saw, and now it's just really taken off. We've now started to see branding on the inside of their lips. They'll take their bottom lip and they'll tattoo their name on the inside of their lip. It's just crazy how this stuff is just developing and where it's going. I think that's it. I don't think I have any more. Tried to get through this information quickly because I wanted to have an opportunity. If you have questions, by all means, please throw them out there and we'll see if we can answer them or at least point you in the right direction.
If I can just say something about procedure here real quick. If you're not interested in staying for question and answer time, feel free to take a moment right now to make your way out. I know a number of you are here for a class, and we're really glad you're here because this weaves into your classes, you're taking notes. There'll be some time, informal time afterwards. But we'll be here formally. We won't end until about 8:30. So we have plenty of time for question and answer. But if you, for some reason, need to get up and just quietly make your way out the back, take some coffee with you on the way out. It'll free up a seat or two for someone else if you're not hanging out here. So, but Jason, let me open up the questioning tonight. In just a second, after a few people who need to leave, I can go ahead and do so. So I'm listening, and I'm kind of overwhelmed a little by the heaviness, by the enormity, and by, oh my gosh, this is happening in San Diego. And I'm kind of just maybe a little more personal question, right? You awoke to this from about 2005, 2007 on, but you've been immersed in it for the last 5 or 6, 7 years. What are some of the survival strategies for you and your fellow police officers as you're dealing with this heavy of a reality?
You know, for me, probably the biggest factor on a personal note for me, I am a believer. I believe that this was a calling that I had. This really kind of absorbed the key people that worked on our task force. This was really our life. We were on call 24/7. We spoke. We did ops. It was a full-time job on top of our regular full-time jobs. And we lived and breathed this stuff. And it took a heavy toll on all of our families. I would tell all my investigators that came and worked with our group that make sure you keep yourself centered, because the amount of money you'll make in overtime will not pay for the divorce that will occur if you don't, because it is absorbing. It takes, you get very, very attached to these victims. I had one gal, 18 years old, from Kentucky. She had been out here. She came out here with her pimp. It was her boyfriend. And we worked with her for probably 2 hours. We worked on this interview with her and tried just incredibly to get her to see the truth of what she was involved with. And we had it already all set up that if she wanted to get out of the business, we could put her on a plane that night. We had the resources in play to put her on a plane and fly her home. We made a connection with her little brother, who was still back in Kentucky, and we thought we had her. And at the last minute, she just didn't want to do it, and went back with her pimp, who we had in custody, but we just didn't have enough. We needed her to roll a little bit on him, and she just wouldn't give anything up on him. So we ended up having to release her back to him. And we followed her for a while. She had a few more arrests until she finally left the county, and we don't know where she's at. But those were very, very difficult for a lot of us to deal with. And so, on a personal note, I looked at it. My wife and I talked a lot. We sacrificed a lot. My wife would travel around with me. For a while there, it seemed like we were doing presentations all over the place. And it was kind of our calling. It was what we believed that the Lord had called us to do, and to bring this issue to light and put everything we could into it. And that's what we did for 5 years. We put our heart and soul into it. We worked with some great organizations, some great people that were doing wonderful things for these victims. And that's kind of how we coped with it. It was amazing how this can really wrap around you. I would tell my investigators, and we're talking cops. Cops are probably, again, the hardest, crustiest people you can deal with. And I know I'm one of them. I mean, we're very A personality, and it's our way or no way. And I would bring in these investigators, especially when we moved it into our gang unit. And I'd have these hardcore gang detectives that just looked like, the local dirtbag. And they would come into this interview kind of having their idea that this was just, they're making money, but who really cares? So what? She's a prostitute. We've dealt with them forever. Kind of the same way I looked at it. And you sit in one of those interviews and you hear that one story, and all of a sudden it just touches your heart. You melt inside. You can't believe that another person could do this to another person, and what they were subjected to. I don't know if you can fathom the idea that these girls are out there. They're having sex with 5 to 15 men a night. They're taken to the sleaziest places you can imagine. And this, day in, day out, it doesn't end. It doesn't stop. One of my partners in San Diego Police Department, they worked a lot of the street prostitution. he would take photos of their feet when he'd arrest the girls. And you think, why in the heck would they do that? Because those blisters on the bottom of their feet from wearing high heels for 14, 15 hours a day walking the street was so shocking to a jury that it was like the nail in a coffin for their pimp. But we would get these photos and their feet, and they're just horrific, just raw from all the blisters that had finally popped. And it all started with one gal that we arrested, and her feet were literally just raw on the bottom, on both feet. And she told us that she had asked her pimp the night before if she could just take her shoes off for a little while and walk barefoot to let her feet have a break, that then she'd put the heels back on. And I wouldn't say what he told her, but basically it was no. Put your heels back on and get out. And when we arrested her, all those blisters had popped. And so her feet were just literally raw. And so we took photos of that, and the DA put that up on the slide during the trial, and it was a no-brainer. How could another person do that to another person? It's just horrific. And so that's, we all became very, very tight and worked through our issues that way, because it will get underneath your skin when you start seeing this stuff and you start reading about it and hearing the stories that these people go through. I went through my first CSEC training, the commercial sexual exploitation of children, and I read through an interview with a 17-year-old girl, and that was a life-changing moment for me. I'd only been doing this for about 3 weeks, and I was still on the teetering end of thinking this was kind of a bunch of crap. Why are we involved with this? And I read through that, and I heard the training, and I'll never forget, I went home that night to my wife, and I said, you know what, honey, this is just unbelievable. I don't care if there's anything that we do, this task force, if any operation that is funded through our money, we are going to offer services to these victims regardless of whether or not they want to talk to us or not. Because we got to do something. We got to try to get them off the street. And that's really what we did. And you hear one story, one thing. I can't tell you, if you haven't seen the movie Taken, go watch it. Now in that movie they use heroin as a drug to get them involved with it. We don't see that here. We don't see the pimps allowing them to use narcotics or alcohol. And that's because this is business. They look at the girls as a commodity. If you're high and you're under the influence, you can't perform, and therefore you're not going to make me as much money as you could. And so we don't see that. The pimps do not allow them to use that. But in that movie, they do, but you'll see how they break them down and the horrific stuff that they go through. So.
Other questions?
What's the ratio of men to women in your task force?
We had it's funny you said that, because most of my investigators were male. And we found that was probably a drawback to us. We started bringing service providers with us, and it's funny that my wife was a volunteer with the department, and she came out to an op with us, and she was observing it, and at the end of the night, she says, honey, you guys got to change things. You're dealing with a victim, a girl that's being abused by men, and then at the end, she's sitting in a room surrounded by men. And so we did start to change that. We brought in a few females, and we made sure that we always had a female in the interview, and we would try to work it from that. But we changed a lot of our tactics through that. We started to try to interview her as if she's a rape victim and a domestic violence victim combined. And there's certain things that we do in an interview with that where we would allow her to sit in a higher chair than the interviewer, so that for once in her life she's looking down at a man. Because the way the pimps teach them, especially in the street prostitution, a prostitute is not allowed to make eye contact with a black male. And the reason for that is in the pimping world, in the gangs that are working down on Elkhorn Boulevard, the majority of those gangs are black gangs. And they would teach them that they're not allowed to make eye contact with another black male, because in the game, if you make eye contact, you are considered out of pocket. When you are in pocket, you belong to me. I control you. If you make eye contact with another pimp, you are now out of pocket. You are out of my pocket, and you now belong to him. And as part of the world of pimping, that's acceptable. And I am not going to retaliate against him. I'm going to allow her to go. And so we can have gangs on the same street working their girls from rival gangs, and they won't bother each other, because that's like neutral area. Out of the respect for the game, you can coexist. In one of the cases we had up in North County, NWS was a gang that developed up in the North County. You probably read a lot about this. It occurred in Oceanside. There was a lot of press on it. They were running mostly minors out of some hotels up in Oceanside. But they were two rival gangs that had come together and started handling each other's girls, handling each other's money, and they put aside their differences because it's all about the money. But so in that world, the girls are always taught to be looking down at the ground, unless a potential client is driving up in the car. And so we would set them higher so that they could be looking down on us. So those were types of different little tactics that we would do. We'd have clothes with us so we could give them some clothes, because most of the girls are not dressed very well, as you can imagine. So we did try to change our tactics. We tried to bring in female investigators to kind of break that, because it was right. I mean, here she's being abused by the men, and now she's standing around getting interviewed by all men. And so we did try to change some of those things as we went. Then when we brought a service provider along, that was even better, because now we brought somebody that's not law enforcement into the mix that could bring some credibility to the services that we're telling her that are available and that we really want to get them out. Because again, they've been brainwashed into thinking that all we want to do is throw them in jail. And that's not what we did. We were very big on not putting them in jail unless there was just no way to work around that. But we would try very hard not to put them into jail. We would simply cite them.
Who are the typical clients in San Diego, I guess?
Anybody.
Can you repeat the question for everybody?
The question is, what are the typical clients in San Diego? And really, it's anybody. You name it. Our first one that we came across was a Pizza Hut manager that just got off work. In talking with a lot of the Johns, again, I think that's one of the big things that we as a society need to change our perception of this and our understanding of what prostitution is. I've heard a lot of the Johns say, well, you know what? I can go out, I can go to the bar, I can spend, $50, $100 trying to meet somebody, buy them drinks, develop a relationship, blah, blah, blah. Or I can just go pay for it and have my fun and be done. And I certainly don't agree with it, but I understand that sick reasoning. But if we looked at this differently, if we as a society viewed it differently, that it's not a victimless crime, that these are victims that are being exploited, hopefully that would change. Now, with the pimp, or with the Johns are clients. If you don't know what a John is, part of their arrest, they have to go through John school, where they go through a training, they get some awareness, and the recidivism rate on arrest is 0. We have not had any Johns that have gone through our program that have been rearrested. So hopefully that's a good indicator that it works and that they've now changed their tune.
Yeah, I think because, like you said, a lot of men think that could even think they're helping the woman make a living. They don't realize that they are a victim.
Yeah, you're totally right. It was interesting when we would do these things. Some of the smaller cities would post the operational stats in their papers, and the blogging that would go on. Don't you guys have anything better to do? They're just out there trying to make a living, blah, 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 all that stuff. But again, it's because we as a society don't understand it. If we look at our movies before, you look at Pretty Woman, there was the other movie where she hires a gigolo and takes him to her sister's wedding. And they end up falling in love and having a happy ending. I mean, that's what we as a society look at. But it's not. It's not the case. So we have to change that idea.
What do you do to protect the patient, or not the patient, the victim's family after, like, you get them in a safe house?
We have never had, in all of our cases here, we've never had a pimp retaliate against a family or against the victim. What's that?
Even though they threaten to?
Even though they threaten, they will threaten and threaten and threaten. But you have to look at it from their standpoint that there's tons of girls out there. And all I need to do is go out and recruit somebody else. I will threaten you and threaten you and threaten you, but if you actually leave it, we've never had it come back. So far, thank God. So it's all smoke and mirrors. But hopefully that doesn't change.
Is it hard to get a conviction if you don't have a girl to testify?
Oh gosh, yes, extremely. These are the most complex cases I've ever worked. We do about everything that we can as far as the technical side of it. The phone is the key. They communicate everything over a phone. It's just a crazy business. We will have a girl delivered to wherever we're working by the pimp. He will drive her up. We'll do surveillances. We'll end up making contact with him. He'll be sitting in the car on a laptop with a Verizon card, posting her back up. We'll do everything that we can without her testimony to try to make a conviction, but they are extremely, extremely difficult. You got to remember, this is like, unfortunately, the worst victim in the world. She's not cooperative. If she is cooperative, there's a lot of reluctance. She normally has a criminal history of some sort because she's been out on the street for so long. So the first thing that we do is everything she starts to tell us, we try to validate. And it may not necessarily be important to the case. If she says she was in a hotel in Anaheim at a Best Western, we will do everything we can to try to prove that's true. Although it doesn't have any relevance to the case that we're dealing with, there's nothing there, but it shows that she can tell the truth. And in the jury's eyes, that's what we want to do. We want to bring what she is saying, bring some truth to it. But yes, they are extremely, extremely difficult cases. And the DA's office, there's one prosecutor in this county that is phenomenal. And it is an expertise on prosecuting these. So yeah, they're very, very tough.
Did the girl ever get to nursing school?
You know, I don't know. I assume she did. That was her whole thing. She wanted to apply for nursing school. The DA dropped the charges on her, so she never got charged with anything. And that's a big thing that we would do. A lot of cases, the DA has discretion on whether or not to issue on a case, and in her particular case, they didn't. So I'm assuming she did. But thank goodness she got out of it. I know the detective that was the lead on it kept in contact with her for quite a while. You almost really develop a relationship with your victims. A couple of my investigators that have moved on to other jobs now still receive phone calls from some of their victims. You almost kind of become a part of their life, a support system. And even though the case has been done for a long time, you're still kind of part of their life because they just don't have anything else. These are great.
You said about like 1% of the people that you came in contact with were men. Like, how does that process and like the way people target them, like the men, look differently than the women?
You know, I think that a lot of it had the type of operations that we were doing. We didn't really target a lot of male prostitution. Not that it is nearly as prevalent on the internet as the female prostitution, but I also think that it's probably on the more lower level of our being able to really get involved with it. Male victims that we have had are very, very reluctant to ever talk about it, probably because of society's stigmas with homosexuality and such. And so they, just like if you look at domestic violence, it's very, very few male victims of domestic violence because of the way our society looks at it and how men perceive themselves. But yeah, we just didn't have a lot of cases of it. We were looking, but maybe not as hard, I don't know. That would be something that we would debate. But yeah, we just didn't see as much. But it wasn't as prevalent as. It just wasn't where the female prostitution was just, it was just everywhere. It just didn't stop. We couldn't work enough hours to address the issue.